The outpost was quiet that morning, a kind of silence that felt less like peace and more like neglect. Dr. Jeff Barrett stood before the flickering terminal, its pale green light reflecting off his tired eyes. The hum of old machines filled the medbay, blending with the faint whistle of wind outside the reinforced windows. Nexa 7 was a world of amber skies and violet storms, beautiful from a distance, but suffocating up close. 3 months into deployment, Jeff had learned that beauty didn't make isolation easier. It only made it lonelier. He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of armor plates he hadn't removed since sunrise. Regulations said medical officers had to stay combat ready, even on peaceful assignments. As if anyone could call this place peaceful. The supply inventory blinked its defiance at him. Antibiotics, half stock. Tissue regenerators, none. Command would call it efficient rationing. Jeff called it malpractice, disguised as diplomacy. He muttered under his breath, 12 years of service, and they've turned me into a glorified nurse with a gun. His words hung in the sterile air, unanswered. He almost welcomed the boredom until a small shadow crossed the threshold. "Hello, human man." A voice chimed, bright and disarming. Jeff turned. Standing in the doorway was a Lyrani girl, maybe 7 years old by human measure. Her skin the color of soft azure light. Her pale silver hair was woven into neat braids that bounced when she moved. The sight of her was so vivid against the dull steel of the medbay that Jeff blinked, half convinced she was a dream conjured by exhaustion. "Hi there," he said carefully, forcing warmth into his voice. "You lost?" "No," she declared, stepping forward with confident little strides. "I'm exploring. Are you the doctor?" Jeff nodded. "That's me, Dr. Barrett. I'm Asira," she announced proudly, as though her name itself were a badge of honor. Her eyes shimmered like bioluminescent crystals, studying him with innocent fascination. "What happened to your face?" she asked, pointing at the healing cut on his cheek. Jeff chuckled despite himself. "Just a scratch. From work." "My father says humans are fragile," she said with complete seriousness. "But you don't look fragile. You look strong." He smiled faintly. "We break, but we fix ourselves. That's how we get through." Asira tilted her head. "You fix people too?" "When I can." Her gaze darted to the equipment behind him. "Can you show me how your machines work, please? I want to be a healer when I grow up." The way she said it, so earnest, so certain, tugged at something in Jeff that had been numb for years. "All right, but only if you promise not to touch anything dangerous." "I promise," she said, hopping onto a stool with the energy of someone unacquainted with fear. Jeff picked up a portable scanner, its smooth handle familiar and comforting in his hands. "This one shows what's inside our bodies," he explained. "Like magic?" "Like science," he corrected with a grin. "It doesn't hurt at all. Want to see?" Her eyes widened. "Can you scan me? I want to see what I look like inside." Jeff hesitated. Protocol frowned on unnecessary scans, but her excitement was contagious. "All right, hold still." The scanner hummed softly, light sweeping over her small frame. The holographic display flared to life, and Jeff's breath caught. The image hovering before him was wrong. Beneath the perfect blue of her skin lay a lattice of pain. Ribs that had fractured and healed crooked, hairline fractures along her left arm, old internal bruising. Deep tissue scarring marred organs too small to bear such damage. These weren't accidents. These were patterns, systematic, repeated. He'd seen bodies like this before: war orphans, prisoners, victims. Never a child this young. Asira giggled, mistaking his silence for awe. "Is that my heart?" she asked, pointing at the glowing shape pulsing faintly in the projection. "It's so pretty and blue." Jeff's throat tightened. He forced a smile that felt like glass in his mouth. "Yeah," he managed. "That's your heart. Strong one, too." She beamed, utterly unaware of the horror reflected in his eyes. "I told you I'm strong," she said, hopping off the stool. "Torrin says I heal faster than everyone else." The name lodged like a splinter in Jeff's mind. Torrin. He crouched to her level, voice steady only through sheer discipline. "Torrin takes care of you?" "He takes care of lots of children. He says we're special." She said it with pride, not realizing what those words implied. Jeff's hands curled into fists behind his knees. He wanted to march out of the medbay right then and find whoever Torrin was. But all he could do was nod and say, "You really are special, Asira." When she skipped out into the amber dusk a few minutes later, humming to herself, Jeff remained still. The scanner's hologram lingered in the air, flickering like a ghost. He stared at it until the machine powered down, leaving him alone with the hum of silence and a rage he didn't know how to contain. That night, he couldn't sleep. The image replayed behind his eyelids, the tiny body riddled with scars, the bright eyes that still sparkled with wonder. He had seen men torn apart by war, civilians crushed beneath collapse and fire, but none of it had pierced him like this. Somewhere beyond that amber horizon, a monster was hurting children, and command would tell him to file a report and forget. He lay in the dark, jaw clenched, pulse hammering against the pillow. "Not this time," he whispered to the shadows. "Not this one." And for the first time in years, Dr. Jeff Barrett felt something stronger than duty-righteous, defiant. Human anger. The next morning dawned under a sky that glowed like molten glass. The kind of amber light that made Nexus 7 look deceptively calm. Dr. Jeff Barrett sat at his desk, eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep, watching the same phrase flash across his terminal for the third time. Access denied. His fingers hovered above the keys, trembling with frustration. Every attempt to file a civilian welfare report had been blocked by the colony's bureaucracy. Military personnel require Level 4 clearance for civilian oversight. The words mocked him in sterile blue letters. He slammed his hand against the desk, the echo rattling a stack of medical charts. "Level 4 clearance," he muttered bitterly. "Right, because saving a child requires political approval now." The door hissed open behind him. Nurse Caldwell, a steady presence in this otherwise dismal post, leaned in with cautious eyes. "Doctor, Colonel Harrington on line 1. He says it's urgent." Jeff straightened, forcing his voice into something resembling professionalism. "Patch him through." The colonel's face appeared on the holodisplay. Every inch the hardened career soldier square jaw, silver hair, eyes that had long forgotten softness. "Dr. Barrett," he said without preamble, "I understand you've been making inquiries into local civilian matters." "Yes, sir," Jeff said evenly, though his pulse ticked high. "A Lyrani child presented evidence of severe abuse. I'm requesting authorization to investigate further." "Out of the question." Harrington's voice was as cold as the void between stars. "We are guests on this planet. The Lyrani have their own customs and laws. Interference could spark a diplomatic incident. With respect, sir, broken bones aren't customs. You're out of line." "Doctor, maybe the line's in the wrong place," Jeff snapped before he could stop himself. A pause crackled through the connection. Harrington's gaze narrowed. "You will submit your report through the liaison office. That's an order. And when they bury it under red tape, then you've done your duty. Stay in your lane, Barrett. That's how we keep the peace." The holla cut off. The silence that followed was deafening. Caldwell lingered near the door, sympathy flickering across her face. "You won't win going through command," she said quietly. "You know that." Jeff nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I know." When she left, The room felt even smaller. He stared at the empty chair where Asira had sat yesterday, legs swinging, laughter like sunlight in a place built of shadows. He could almost hear her voice. "Human man, I heal fast." He swore softly, shoved his chair back, and began pulling files from the database, hunting for any mention of her guardian, Torin. There was nothing official. No records, no registration, not even a last name. Whoever Torin was, he existed only in the gray space between law and neglect. Jeff was still digging when the medbay door slid open again. "Dr. Barrett?" Nurse Caldwell's voice was strained. "You should come to exam room 2. The tone sent a cold weight through his gut. He found Asira sitting on the table, small hands folded in her lap, her bright eyes duller today. She wore a long-sleeved tunic despite the humid air. When she looked up, her smile was hesitant. "You promised to teach me about healing," she said softly. "I did," Jeff said, forcing calm into his voice. "How are you feeling today?" "I fell down the stairs," she said quickly. The words were too neat, too rehearsed. His throat tightened. "Can I take a look?" She hesitated, then nodded. "You'll use the light machine again?" "If that's okay." He activated the scanner, the hum filling the silence. As the holographic display appeared, he felt his chest tighten. Fresh fractures over old ones, new bruises layered on faded scars. It was like looking at a history of cruelty mapped in bone and tissue. He swallowed hard, keeping his voice steady. "That looks like a bad fall." She gave a small shrug, eyes darting away. "Torin says I'm clumsy. Do you believe him?" He asked gently. Her lower lip trembled, but she forced a smile. "He says it's normal for children to get hurt." "Some accidents are normal," Jeff said, crouching to meet her gaze. "But adults are supposed to keep children safe. You deserve that." Something flickered in her eyes, fear, confusion, or maybe hope. Then, with the innocent honesty of a child, she lifted her tunic slightly. "Can your machine fix these too?" His breath caught. Across her back, fresh bruises bloomed in the shape of fingers. Beneath them, a lattice of pale scars traced old wounds. He forced his face into the calm mask of a doctor, though every part of him screamed to storm out and end this now. "We'll take care of it," he said softly. "But I think I'll need another healer's help today." "Another human?" she asked, hopeful. "No," Jeff said, his mind already moving. "Someone even better." He turned to Caldwell. "Get a message to Nara, the Lirani liaison. Tell her it's urgent." "Are you sure?" Caldwell asked low. "You'll get in trouble for this." "I'm already in trouble," Jeff said, not taking his eyes off Asira. "Now I'm just making it worth something." The nurse hurried off. Jeff stayed, watching the child trace her own small scars with absent fingers. He'd seen horror in battlefields, but this was evil that wore civility like a mask. He clenched his jaw, feeling the shift inside him, the line between duty and defiance snapping for good. Outside, the amber light deepened to crimson as Nexus 7's twin suns began to sink. When the door opened again 20 minutes later, Nara stepped through, tall and graceful, her sapphire skin catching the dying light. "You said it was urgent," she began, but when she saw Asira, her composure shattered. Her eyes filled with something raw and dangerous. Jeff met her gaze across the room. Neither spoke, but understanding passed between them like current. The rules didn't matter anymore. They both knew what they had to do. The azure mist shimmered like liquid neon against the dusk of Nexus 7, its curved glass walls breathing blue light into the humid night. Inside, laughter and low music mingled with the faint hiss of vapor vents. Perfumed smoke hung in the air, thick enough to taste. Jeff Barrett stood outside for a moment, his reflection fractured in the mirror-bright doors, his pulse a hard drum in his throat. He looked nothing like the disciplined medic who'd arrived on this planet months ago. Gone were the green combat plates and standard-issue discipline. In their place, plain civilian fatigues, a nondescript jacket concealing a compact sidearm, and eyes that had learned how to lie. Beside him, Nara moved with effortless grace, her silver-white hair unbound for the first time since he'd met her. The dress she wore shimmered like spilled starlight, drawing glances even before they entered. To the crowd, she was just another companion in a pleasure house, but to Jeff, she was fire wrapped in calm. "Remember," she murmured, her voice a soft melody against the pulse of music, "tonight, you're not a doctor. You're Jeff Vang, a private security contractor with expensive tastes and flexible morals." Her hand slipped into the crook of his arm, a practiced gesture, intimate enough to sell the illusion. "And you?" he asked, his voice low. "Lista," she said, smiling with professional seduction that didn't quite hide her nerves. "Your companion for the evening. Try to look like you've earned me." Jeff's mouth twitched despite the tension. "I'll do my best." The doors slid open, spilling them into the chaos of scent and sound. The azure mist was a study in contrast elegant architecture, concealing something rotten beneath. Lairani dancers moved through drifting holograms. Laughter echoed from shadowed booths. And at the center of it all sat those who mattered: wealthy colonists, off-world traders, and Vexry elites draped in gold. Nara leaned closer, her lips brushing his ear in a way that made his heartbeat stumble. 3:00, she whispered. "Gold collar. That's Governor Drex. If he's here, Torrin won't be far." Jeff kept his gaze casual, pretending to scan the room while his peripheral vision locked onto the tall reptilian figure surrounded by attendants. Drex's scaled skin gleamed like polished stone. His eyes were pale, cold, and calculating. "You're sure he's involved?" Jeff asked softly. "He funds the orphanage," she said bitterly. "He calls it charity." They made their way toward a private booth in the corner, every step of the way a performance, his hand on her waist, her body leaning just close enough to suggest indulgence. They ordered drinks, an amber liquid that burned like regret. Jeff sipped, his eyes never resting too long in one place. "We're being watched," Nara murmured after a moment, her fingers tracing a slow path along his jaw. "Don't react." The man at the bar tall, silver cuffs. "That's Torrin." Jeff resisted the urge to turn. "What's the play?" "He'll come to us," she said. "Torrin likes to feel in control." Her hand found his beneath the table, squeezing once. "And when he does, we'll give him exactly what he wants." Minutes passed like hours. Then the air shifted. Jeff felt the gaze before he saw its source. A Lairani male approached, expensive fabric draped over lean frame, expression carved in confidence. His eyes were cold mirrors, beautiful, empty, dangerous. "Lista," he said, his voice like silk pulled taut. "It's been too long." Nara stiffened, but only for a breath. Then she turned, smiling with the warmth of a predator. "Torrin," she purred. "I thought you'd forgotten me." "Hardly," he said, his gaze sliding to Jeff. "And who is your friend?" "Jeff Vane," Jeff said easily, extending a hand. "Private security. I go where the work and the company are good." Torrin ignored the gesture, studying him as though cataloging a specimen. "Humans are rare in my establishment. I hope you're not easily shocked." "I've seen my share of things," Jeff said evenly. "I came for something unique. Lista told me this was the place." A flicker of intrigue crossed Torrin's expression. "Indeed, the azure mist caters to refined tastes. Perhaps we should discuss them somewhere more private." Nara's nails brushed Jeff's wrist in warning. "That would be delightful," she said, masking the tension under a flawless smile. Torrin gestured toward a corridor, bathed in blue haze. As they followed, Nara leaned close enough for Jeff to feel her breath. "Keep your temper," she whispered. "He'll push to see what kind of man you are." "He's about to find out," Jeff muttered. The corridor opened into a private lounge lined with holographic art and soft chairs that seemed to breathe. At the center sat Governor Drex, as immovable as a statue. Torrin bowed his head. "Governor, allow me to introduce a new client. Mr. Vane, human, wealthy, curious." Drex's voice was a rasp, dry as old paper. "Curious about what, I wonder?" Jeff met his gaze without flinching. "Exclusivity. I've heard the Azure Mist offers experiences one doesn't find through standard channels." Drex's eyes narrowed slightly, the thin line of his mouth curling in amusement. "Such discretion is costly." "Cost is not my concern," Jeff said, sliding a credit sheet across the table. "Quality is?" Drex examined it briefly before flicking it aside, unimpressed but intrigued. "Very well," he said. "Tomorrow evening. A private showing. We'll see if your tastes align with ours." Torrin's smile was sharp as glass. "I'll make the arrangements." As they left the lounge, Jeff's pulse thundered. The words private showing clung to him like oil. He knew what that meant now. Proof, victims, evidence, and maybe, if they were lucky, Asira. Outside, the night air felt too thin. Nara exhaled shakily, her poise cracking for the first time. "We did it," she whispered. He took the bait. Jeff turned to her, searching her face. "You okay?" "No," she admitted. "But I will be." The neon light painted her blue skin with violet fire, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, of fear swallowed for something greater. "We'll end this," Jeff said quietly. "All of it." She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between them. Then she nodded. "Tomorrow night, we take everything from them." They walked away from the club side by side, the neon fading behind them, unaware that Drex's cold eyes watched their departure through the glass. Already calculating, the next evening dripped with tension, the kind that hums beneath the skin and makes every breath feel too loud. Nexus 7's amber sky had dimmed to bruise purple, and from the settlement's industrial sector the azure mist glowed like a beacon for every kind of corruption the colony pretended not to see. Jeff Barrett adjusted the collar of his plain jacket, feeling the concealed weight of his pistol pressing against his ribs. The streets buzzed with hover traffic and chatter from vendors, but all he could hear was his heartbeat and Nara's quiet breathing beside him. She wore a flowing black gown this time, less revealing than the night before, but no less arresting. Her silver hair braided down her back in the style of the old Lirani healers. The effect was deliberate. She looked dignified, untouchable. "You don't have to come," Jeff said, though both knew it was a lie. "If I don't," she murmured, "they'll know it's a trap." Her eyes flicked up to meet his. "Stay close. And remember, Drex thinks you're a buyer. You'll need to play the part until the signal." Jeff nodded once, jaw tightening. They entered through a side corridor this time, bypassing the public glamour for something colder concrete halls lit by sterile blue strips. The music from the main club was muted here, replaced by the hum of security drones. At a checkpoint, a Vexery guard scanned Jeff's identification chip and gave a slow, reptilian smile. "Governor Drex is expecting you." The word sent a chill through him. The doors ahead opened with a hydraulic sigh, revealing a wide chamber arranged like a private theater. Rows of plush seats ringed a raised platform under shifting hololights. The air was too clean, chemically filtered to hide the stench of fear. Drex sat at the head of the central booth, draped in ceremonial robes of gold and ivory, surrounded by aides and clients from half a dozen species. Torrin stood near the stage, his expression slick with pride. "Welcome, Mr. Vane," Drex rasped, gesturing toward an empty seat beside him. "Lista, you look radiant tonight. Please enjoy the show." Nara inclined her head, her smile sharp and empty. Jeff forced himself to sit, every instinct screaming to reach for his weapon. "I was told there would be demonstrations," he said carefully. "Indeed." Drex's forked tongue flicked once, tasting the anticipation in the air. "Tonight's presentation features some of our newest acquisitions. Perfect stock, resilient, obedient." A soft hum signaled the beginning. The lights dimmed, and a line of children was led onto the platform by attendants in silver masks. They moved slowly, their expressions vacant, drugged. The holographic light painted them in shifting shades of blue and green, turning them into objects instead of people. Jeff's stomach turned. He had to clench his hands to keep from trembling. A hidden micro-camera in his collar recorded everything, feeding the evidence straight to the secure channel he'd opened earlier that day. He told himself to focus, to survive until extraction, but when the last group stepped forward, his breath caught. Asira. She looked smaller than he remembered. Her pale hair unbraided, her skin dulled by sedation. The spark that had once danced in her eyes was gone, replaced by a hollow daze. But when her gaze drifted over the crowd and landed on him, something flickered. Recognition. Hope. "The blue one," Jeff said quietly, forcing his voice to remain steady. "She's remarkable." Drex's eyes gleamed. "Excellent taste, Mr. Vane. That one is indeed exceptional. Lirani physiology heals fast makes them profitable for repeat clientele." Jeff's hand tightened around the armrest until his knuckles whitened. "I'd like a private examination," he said, every word a knife in his throat. "Of course," Drex said smoothly. After the general showing, Nara's hand found his under the table, squeezing once, grounding him. The show continued a grotesque parade disguised as business, but Jeff saw nothing except Asira's small form swaying on the platform. When it finally ended, Drex rose. "My associates will arrange your viewing. Torrin, see to our guest." But before Torrin could move, the chamber doors slammed open. "Governor Drex!" A voice barked. "This event is unauthorized under Terran colonial law." The entire room froze. A tall figure strode in, flanked by Terran soldiers in plainclothes. Colonel Harrington. Jeff's heart dropped. "What the hell are you doing here?" Drex hissed, rising to his full height. "This is a private function." "Not anymore," Harrington said, weapon drawn. "Dr. Barrett, step away from the governor." Every eye turned toward Jeff. The air seemed to collapse. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Nara's fingers tightened painfully around his. The deception was over. "Dr. Barrett?" Drex repeated, his voice venomous. So the buyer was a spy. Torrin snarled something in Lirani and reached for a concealed weapon. Jeff didn't think he moved. He shoved Nara down as blaster fire tore through the air. Chaos exploded. Guests screamed, guards drew weapons, and the chamber filled with smoke and panic. Harrington's voice thundered through the commotion. "Terran intelligence! Everyone down!" Jeff pulled Nara behind the nearest column, returning fire with precise surgical bursts. "You could have warned me," he shouted. "I did," Harrington grunted, ducking behind a fallen table. "You just weren't listening. Been tracking these bastards for months." Perfect timing. Jeff yelled back. "Always was," Harrington said, popping up to take another shot. Through the haze, Jeff saw Torrin dragging Asira toward a side exit, his arm locked around her waist. "Nara," Jeff shouted, pointing. "He's got her." She nodded, eyes blazing, and sprinted after them while Jeff and Harrington held the line. Drex retreated with his aides toward a rear corridor, shouting orders into his communicator. "We need to split," Jeff called. "You take Drex. You take the kids." Harrington finished. Jeff gave a grim nod. He fought his way through the smoke-filled chaos, shoving past wounded guards and scattering furniture, until he burst through the side door, just in time to see Torin forcing Asira up a loading ramp toward a waiting shuttle. The roar of its engines drowned the sound of Jeff's boots on the metal floor. The world narrowed to a single thought: not again. Not her. He raised his weapon and shouted, "Torin, it's over." The trafficker spun, his face twisting in fury, dragging the child tighter against his chest. "Stay back, human, or she dies." Asira's terrified eyes met Jeff's, and she shook her head slightly, as if begging him not to stop. Jeff's finger hovered on the trigger. Every muscle coiled. "Let her go," he said. "You have nowhere to run." Torin sneered. "You think your kind can touch me? I have buyers across 3 systems. I'll vanish before your military even files the report." The engines screamed louder, the heat from the thrusters washing over them. And then, suddenly, Asira moved. With all the defiant strength her small frame could muster, she stomped on Torin's foot and bit his arm. The shock made him loosen his grip for a fraction of a second, but that was all Jeff needed. He lunged forward, tackling the Lirani to the ground. The weapon clattered away as they crashed against the ramp. Fists, elbows, desperation. Torin was faster, but Jeff was angrier. They rolled, each blow landing with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Torin's hand found a blade, the edge catching the light. Jeff caught his wrist, twisting until bone snapped with a sharp crack. The trafficker screamed. Then Jeff saw a flash of movement. Asira, tossing something toward him. A medical scanner. The same model that had revealed her scars. "Human, Nan," she cried. "Catch." Jeff snatched it midair and swung it hard. The scanner struck Torin's temple with a sickening thud. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of cooling engines. Torin slumped, unconscious. Jeff staggered upright, breath ragged. "You did good, kid," he said hoarsely, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You were so damn brave." Her small hands clutched his sleeve. "You came," she whispered. "I promised I would." Alarms blared in the distance, reinforcements closing in. Jeff pulled her close, scanning the dark hangar. "Come on, we're getting you out of here." He led her down the ramp toward the open night, the air thick with smoke and sirens. Behind them, the shuttle's engines died, and the lights of the azure mist flickered out one by one. Like the fading pulse of something rotten, finally giving up. The wind at the edge of the landing bay whipped through the smoke, carrying with it the metallic tang of ozone and the distant echo of blaster fire. Jeff Barrett crouched behind the cargo hauler, his breath ragged, the small form of Asira pressed close against his chest. The child trembled, her small fingers clutching at his jacket as though afraid he might vanish if she let go. "You're safe now," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. The chaos from the azure mist spilled into the streets beyond sirens, shouted orders, the hum of shuttle engines preparing for escape. He glanced toward the horizon, where a column of light marked the spaceport. That's where Drex would run. And if Nara was still alive, that's where she'd be heading too. Jeff tightened his grip on Asira's shoulder. "We have to move, kid. Think you can be brave for me a little longer?" She nodded, lips pressed tight, eyes shining in the dim light. "I can." He managed a small smile. "That's my girl." He led her through the narrow maintenance corridors that twisted like veins beneath the settlement, his pistol drawn and heart pounding with each step. Every sound made him flinch, the clatter of boots, the hiss of hydraulic doors. Twice he had to shove Asira behind crates as Vexery guards swept past, their voices cold and guttural. They were searching for survivors or witnesses, or both. By the time they reached the outer rim of the industrial sector, the night had deepened into a surreal calm, broken only by the distant pulse of the alarms. A transport shuttle waited in a loading bay, its engines dark. A perfect escape if he could get it working. Jeff knelt by the access panel, fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. "Human man?" Asira whispered behind him. "The pretty blue lady," she said softly. "Is she okay?" His chest tightened. "I hope so," he said. "She's tougher than she looks." "You like her," the girl said matter-of-factly. Jeff almost laughed, the sound rough in his throat. "You're too young to notice things like that." "I notice everything," she replied, faintly smiling despite her exhaustion. "You look at her like she's light." The panel clicked open beneath his hands. "Smart kid," he said quietly, glancing at her with something close to pride. "Let's make sure we live long enough to tell her that, okay?" He keyed the ignition, the shuttle's engines coughing to life. The sound drew attention. Shouts erupted down the corridor, alien voices barking orders. Jeff grabbed his sidearm and fired down the hallway, the muzzle flashes slicing through the dark. "Strap in," he shouted as he vaulted into the cockpit. The shuttle's console flickered half the systems were still in lockdown. He slammed the throttle anyway. The ship lurched upward, engines whining in protest as the landing bay's blast doors struggled to open. A streak of plasma fire grazed the hull, lighting the cockpit in flashes of orange. Asira screamed, covering her ears. Jeff reached back, voice firm but calm. "It's okay, I've got us." "You trust me?" She nodded through tears. "Always. Good." He punched the thrusters. The shuttle blasted through the half-open doors into the open air, smoke trailing behind them. Nexus 7 sprawled below a web of lights and shadow under the bleeding hues of twin moons. "Command, this is Barrett." He barked into the com, switching channels. Static hissed, then a familiar voice cut through. "Barrett, it's Harrington." "You still breathing?" "Barely. I've got Asira and 5 other kids from the holding cells." "Drex?" "Heading for the diplomatic bay with a prisoner, your Lirani liaison." Jeff's stomach dropped. "Nara? Alive for now." "We're tracking his shuttle, but Terran forces can't breach the bay without triggering a treaty violation." "Then I'm not waiting for permission," Jeff said. "Barrett, sir, with respect, I'm done asking." He cut the channel before the colonel could respond. He turned to Asira, who was watching him with wide eyes. "You did good tonight," he said softly. "You saved more people than you know. But the pretty lady, I'll get her back." He wasn't sure if he was promising her or himself, but it didn't matter. He throttled up, the shuttle angling toward the glimmering towers of the spaceport. The diplomatic sector loomed ahead, isolated by security fields that shimmered like heat mirages. A single Vixray transport sat fueled and ready, its engines glowing white against the night. On the landing platform below, Nara struggled in the grip of 2 guards, her wrists bound, a blade pressed to her throat. Drex stood beside her, his golden robe spattered with soot, his expression carved in fury. Jeff's pulse spiked. "Hang on, kid," he said, angling the shuttle hard. The small vessel screamed through the sky, alarms wailing. He cut the power mid-descent, letting the ship fall the last 50 meters before slamming the landing struts into the platform with a thunderous crash. Metal shrieked, sparks flew, and the guards staggered back in shock. Jeff was already moving, gun raised. "Let her go," he shouted, stepping down the ramp into the thick haze. Drex turned, his reptilian face twisting into a sneer. "Another step, human, and I'll end her." Nara met Jeff's eyes, silent but fierce, a spark of defiance, still alive, even with a blade at her throat. "The game's over, Drex," Jeff said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. "We have the evidence. The children are safe. You're done." "Evidence means nothing to the powerful," Drex hissed, pressing the blade closer. "You'll learn that soon enough." He reached for his wrist communicator, but Nara moved first. She drove her elbow into his side, twisting just enough for the blade to graze her skin instead of her throat. Jeff didn't hesitate. He fired once, clean and controlled. The blast struck Drex in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The guards lunged, but Jeff took them down with 2 precise shots, the hum of energy echoing into silence. Nara stumbled forward, gasping, her wrists bleeding from the restraints. Jeff dropped his weapon and caught her before she fell. For a moment, neither spoke, their foreheads pressed together, the world around them a blur of smoke and light. "You came," she whispered. "You knew I would," he said, voice low, rough with relief. "Are the children safe?" "All of them," he said. "Asira too." Nara closed her eyes, tears cutting clean lines down her dusty skin. "Then it's over." But Jeff looked out across the landing pad, at the wreckage of Drex's shuttle and the night beyond, and knew it wasn't. The bodies of the fallen guards shimmered under the emergency lights, and in the distance, the sound of Terran transports signaled the arrival of reinforcements. "No," he said quietly, holding her close. "This is just the start." Behind them, Asira's small voice came through the open comm system from the shuttle cockpit. "Human man, are you coming home now?" Jeff's throat closed, and he smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid," he said, lifting Nara into his arms. "We're all going home." As he carried her aboard, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, bleeding gold into the amber sky. The smoke below caught the sunrise like fire, and for the first time in years, Jeff felt something like hope. 3 months later, the amber sky above Nexus 7 burned softer, filtered through the dome's newly repaired weather field, turning the valley into a landscape of gentle light instead of storm. The war zone tension that had once clung to the colony was gone, replaced by a cautious kind of peace. A joint Terran-Lirani medical banner fluttered outside the new pediatric center, a facility built where the old outpost once stood, its glass walls reflecting the sky like still water. Dr. Jeff Barrett stood on the porch with his hands tucked into his coat pockets, watching the settlement breathe again. He should have felt proud, maybe even content. Instead, a quiet heaviness sat in his chest, the echo of everything they'd lost and the ghosts of those they couldn't save. The hum of children's laughter drifted from inside the clinic. It made him smile despite the ache. "Thinking too much again," came Nara's voice behind him. She stepped out into the sunlight, her blue skin glowing faintly beneath its warmth. The wind teased the silver braids that framed her face, and for a moment, Jeff forgot to breathe. She wore no uniform now, just the soft linen of civilian life. "Occupational hazard," he said. "Doctors don't know how to turn it off." "You're not just a doctor anymore," she reminded him gently, moving beside him. "You're the director of this place. The first Terran-Lirani joint facility on this world. That counts for something." He looked down at her hand, warm where it brushed his sleeve. "It only exists because you kept pushing the council. Because you made them see what those children went through. Because you refused to stop looking," she countered. Her eyes softened. "You could have left after the investigation ended." "Why didn't you?" Jeff hesitated, watching the golden horizon beyond the dome. "Because leaving would have meant forgetting," he said quietly. "And I can't forget her face that first day when she smiled like she had no idea what pain was supposed to mean. Or yours when you realized I wasn't going to turn away." The corners of her mouth lifted in a smile, that carried both sorrow and light. "You sound like a poet." "Don't tell anyone," he murmured. "I have a reputation for being practical." Inside, a small voice interrupted them. "Human man." Asira bounded through the doorway, her small braids flying, a gleaming medical scanner clutched in her hands. She had grown taller in those few months, her skin brighter, her laughter free of the haunted tremor that used to live in it. "Look," she said proudly. "I can see inside the flowers in the garden. They have little tubes like blood, but for water." Jeff crouched to her level, smiling. "You're becoming quite the healer." "Nara says I can start learning real treatments soon," Asira said, puffing her chest with pride. Then she tilted her head. "Will you stay for dinner tonight?" Nara made that earth food again. The long noodles. "Spaghetti," Nara said with a laugh. "Though my version might be slightly experimental." "I wouldn't miss it," Jeff said, ruffling Asira's hair. The child squealed and darted back inside, humming a tune that carried through the open air. For a long moment, they watched her disappear down the hallway. Then Nara spoke, quieter now. "She's healing," she said. "Faster than anyone expected." "Scars fade," Jeff said softly, "but they don't vanish. Not the important ones." She turned toward him, and he saw the faint tremor in her hand, the haunted flicker that sometimes crossed her expression when she thought no one was watching. "You still have nightmares," he said. It wasn't a question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "About Drex, about what they did to us before him." She hesitated. "There's something I haven't told you. Something you should know." Jeff's stomach tightened. "Go on." "When the investigators searched Torrens' data cache," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "they found records from before his operation. The earliest files were human." Jeff frowned. "Human?" "Terran military contractors," she whispered. "They started the experiments that made the Lirani children heal faster. They sold the data off-world when the war ended. Drex's network didn't create the trade, it inherited it." Her eyes met his, shimmering with both sorrow and defiance. "It wasn't just alien cruelty, Jeff. It began with your people." The world seemed to tilt around him. The air in his lungs turned sharp. He wanted to deny it, to argue, to say those were different men in a different time, but he couldn't. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, he said, "Then we'll fix it." "All of it?" "The reports, the records, every name, every child. If humanity started this, then humanity will help end it." Nara's gaze softened. "You always believe you can fix everything. That's what doctors do. And soldiers?" He smiled faintly. "They protect the ones who can't fight back." For a long moment, they stood together, the wind brushing past, like the quiet rhythm of another world learning to heal. Inside, the laughter rose again, bright and echoing. Nara reached up, cupping his cheek, her thumb tracing the faint scar there. "You know," she said softly, "Asira once told me something. She said you look at me like I'm light." He blinked, startled, then chuckled. "She said the same about me. Children always see more than we think." Her hand fell away, but not the warmth it left behind. "Stay tonight," she said, almost a whisper. "Not as the doctor. Not as the hero. Just stay." Jeff didn't answer right away. He looked at the clinic, the golden light spilling across the floor, the sound of small feet racing down the halls. Then he reached for her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. "I wasn't planning on leaving," he said simply. Later that evening, they sat around a table built from reclaimed ship metal, laughter and conversation weaving through the air. The children talked about their lessons. Nurse Caldwell teased Jeff about his terrible cooking. Nara watched him with a small smile, her eyes bright in the candlelight. And when the meal was over, when the children were asleep and the dome lights dimmed to twilight, Jeff stood beside her at the window, overlooking the settlement. The stars shimmered above the amber sky like promises waiting to be kept. "You know what amazes me most about humans?" Nara asked softly. "What's that?" "You see something broken, and think not of what it is, but what it could become." Jeff turned to her, his voice quiet. "Maybe that's not just human. Maybe that's hope." She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Hope," she murmured. "Yes, that's the word." Outside, the night settled, peaceful and complete. The wind carried the scent of rain over alien soil. Inside, the ghosts of the past were quiet for once. The little alien girl who had lifted her shirt and broken a human's heart was sleeping safely in the next room, her scars fading under the care of those who loved her. And for the first time since he'd arrived on Nexus 7, Dr. Jeff Barrett felt whole.